Here is my round 2 game from the Leyland Congress, and after that good draw in round 1, I was paired up with black against Martin Burns, who is 162 ECF, and he was white and opened with e4, after which I played the French defence with e6 and he played the Tarash variation, and I took and played knight f6, which is going into the Burns system, which is a pretty good system, good for hacking people up on the G line, castle queen side, etc. Now it goes knight takes f6 check, and I take back with the g pawn to gain this open G line, and I also want to fianchetto my bishop on a long diagonal, and for once I'll get a good bishop in the French. But this is risky because of all these structural weaknesses he can exploit, and also my king can get subjected to a scorching attack on the queen side. He plays bishop e3, bishop d6, knight f3, b6, queen d2, bishop b7, bishop e2, knight d7, and he decides to castle long as well. He could also have castled long and then thrown his pawns at me, but I would have some good counterplay on the G line. But he goes long, and I wasn't sure what to do when white castles long. There's a game where white castles short. I played against Bob Amos, which is a video if you want to take a look at that. And but here he castles long, and I go queen e7, preferring to castle long myself, because I can't really castle short because the pawn shield's too weak and I would get hacked up. And now he plays rook hg1, castle long, and now he plays king b1, a consolidating king move. And you may notice that I can win a pawn here by force with bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, bishop takes h2. Now that would be a rather stupid suicidal idea. First of all, my light squares around my king are practically dead, and I'm in serious trouble here already. You should never give up this light square bishop. I mean, usually in the French you try and get rid of it, but in this line it is vital to keep, otherwise you get hacked. And then after the rook moves and bishop moves back, and after queen c3, white is already threatening queen c6 to a8, and all sorts of nasties, so therefore the pawn was immune. Instead I decide to copy him with my own consolidating move, and now he lashes out with c4, trying to hack me up. He could have played more calmly with g3, just removing the pawn from any potential g-line pressure, but he goes c4, and I decide after some thought to play bishop b4, but in hindsight I think better would have been f5, which weakens e5, but it gains space and clamps down on e4, which I have good control over after knight f6. Say bishop d3, knight f6, and my control over e4 gives me good chances here. But instead I played bishop b4, and after queen c2 I played e5, because he's trying to hack me up on the flank, you see. So the best response to an attack on the flank is a counter in the centre. However, I don't think this was very good, weakening f5 permanently, and also when the knight comes into f5 my queen's attacked. Rook hg8 looks quite good, sacrificing the h7 pawn, where if it's taken then I can play f5, like shutting the queen out temporarily and getting some dynamism in return for the pawn. But then I'd have to be careful of white's passed h pawn then, but I'd have some counterplay against white's king here. Instead I play this dodgy move e5, and now he plays a3. Also possible was d5 straight away, which shuts in my bishop, but at the same time reduces the central tension, and gives white a good space advantage and attacking chances, but it also takes away the option of maybe c5 opening some lines up, which could be used as a pawn sack at some point. But he plays a3, and now I could have played e takes d4 as a Zwischenzug, where if a takes b4 I have d takes e3, f takes c3, and queen takes b4, and not only am I a pawn up, but white's e pawn is very weak, and I have very good chances here. And if knight takes d4, then bishop c5, and then maybe I've got some good play here. Instead I go passively back to d6, and now he goes d5. If he had played b4, just trying to get c5 in, then my counterplay arrives too fast because I can just sacrifice on b4. If he takes back, then I have this amazing looking move bishop e4, where if the bishop is taken then we get a draw by perpetual, and amazingly enough there is nothing white can do to get out of it, because I've always got him. I can always cut the diagonal off, and white can't interpose with anything either. So he has to play bishop d3 if he wants to try and win, but this runs into a pawn fork, and now it's going to be equal material, but white's lost some of his pawn protection around his shield, pawn shield around his king, and I've got good chances. So maybe I think white should take the draw if he happen to do that. d5, bishop c5, because he has weakened c5. I mean, every pawn move creates a weakness, and that's an example of one. Now, he could have gone knight h4 aiming for knight f5, but instead he swaps, and if I take it with the queen, then he has b4, queen f8, and knight h4 is good for white. So I played knight takes c5, and now he plays knight d2, which I don't think is that good, because the knight should be aiming for this weakness on f5, but now I suppose his queen can come there, and he wants to like put a knight on e4 or something. Well, after he's kicked my knight, but I go c6, trying to rip open the diagonal for my bishop, and the only move for white to keep a slight advantage is b4. Everything else gives black the advantage. And after knight d7 takes, and bishop f3, which challenges the long diagonal and practically forces a bishop trade. Also possible was knight e4, a5, an interesting looking move, trying to rip open lines towards the white king, but at the same time weakening my own king. After knight d6, the idea was to implant a knight in d6, and after a takes b4, a takes, knight f8, c5, and white's king's open, but black's king's getting open, and that strong knight on d6 has been solidified, giving white very good chances here. But he plays bishop f3, challenging the long diagonal, and the only move for black to stay in the game actually is bishop takes f3. And I thought here he could have played g takes f3, which gains some g-line pressure as well, but gives white double pawns. And but after a knight f8, then the knight on d2 is blocking the rook on d1, because in the game continuation when he played knight takes f3, I played knight f8, and after rook takes d8 check, queen takes d8, he now has the move rook d1, which if he'd have took with a pawn he wouldn't have had. And now I blunder here with queen e7, putting the queen on the wrong square. In hindsight I should have gone to c7 to put pressure on c4 to stop the next move, which was queen a4. And all of a sudden I'm in big trouble, because he's attacking d7 twice, so my knight and queen are like practically pinned down, and my knight and queen and king are on the only squares which stop infiltrations by his heavy pieces. So in fact the only thing I can really move is the rook. However, I could have tried queen c7, that's the best try. This allows queen e8 check, but after king b7 he now has c5 ripping open lines, and after b takes, knight g6, he has check, king a8, and after rook d7, I can take advantage of his king being open with rook b8, but after takes, check, after the king moves, all them pawns on the king side are in trouble, and this is a winning endgame for white, but not conclusively clear cut. Whereas after the blunder rook g8, he just plays g3, shutting my rook off, and after rook g4, queen c6. However, c5 is stronger. He never actually plays c5, which is surprising. We had like h5 in the last game, now we've got c5, just ripping open lines. Queen c6, and now rook g6, another blunder. I've just completely fallen apart here. Could have played e4, knight d4, e3, and after f takes e3, queen e4 check, and then try and defend the endgame a pawn down, but because I've got double pawns it's hopeless. But after rook g6 he just goes knight h4, and if I go rook g5 then rook d5 is killing, so I just let my rook drop, and also set a little trap where he might be tempted by knight takes f5, but I have the visions of queen takes b4 check, a takes b4, rook takes c6. However, this tactic still does work for white. After rook d8 check, rook c8, takes, he now has a pawn fork, and white is winning here because a pawn up is usually enough for the knight endgame, but he didn't do it. But he has a simple win anyway. You can just take my rook, and now take it back, and now c5 wins quicker, but you only need 1/4 win per game, and queen d6 check just does that easily, because I thought I could maybe hold the exchange down endgame, but after knight e6 he played rook d7, just winning the pawn. And say if I move to f6, then he has rook d6, which skewers the knight and pawn, and I'm going to lose another pawn, and I resigned here. So I'd done quite good holding a stronger player for a lot of the game, but just fell apart a bit at the end. But there was plenty of positives to take from this first day, and it was on to the next day to try and get some points on the board, seeing as I was facing the bottom seed as white. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please leave any comments and thoughts. Thanks very much.